The night had folded itself into a thick blanket of unease when the disguised chef slipped through the creaking back door of the forgotten restaurant. His borrowed uniform hanging loosely on his shoulders and his face shadowed beneath the brim of a cap pulled low. The kind of place where rumors live longer than recipes, and whispers clung to the walls like old grease. And it was here at exactly 3 a.m. that he saw her, the cook in the stark black uniform. Standing alone under the harsh flicker of a single bulb, slicing through slabs of meat with a precision so calm and rhythmic that it felt almost ritualistic. Every movement deliberate, every pause calculated, every breath measured as if time itself bowed before whatever silent purpose guided her hands and the disguised chef. Known in the culinary world for exposing truths hidden beneath polished menus and smiling waiters, felt a chill crawl down his spine as he watched the knife rise and fall, the metallic whisper echoing through the empty kitchen like a warning that no one had dared to translate. And somewhere between the hum of the refrigerator and the faint rattle of an old window pane, he realized this was no ordinary late-night shift and no ordinary cook, because her eyes held a storm, dark and distant, as if she carried entire histories within them. Histories that whispered of abandoned dreams and roads left untraveled. And as he stepped closer, careful not to disturb the air she seemed to command, he caught sight of a worn photograph tucked near the chopping board. Its edges frayed, its faces faded, yet the emotion frozen within it burned fiercely. And he knew then that the story behind why she had skipped college was not one of laziness or rebellion, but of something far more twisted, far more painful, something that had driven her to this lonely hour and this relentless task under a dying light. And still he said nothing, for silence seemed safer, more respectful, as he observed her hands, steady yet scarred, moving with a mastery that spoke of countless nights like this, nights where the world slept and she carved her own fate through flesh and bone. And it was in this silence that the tension grew, thick as smoke from a forgotten pan, and every second stretched, every sound magnified, until even the faint drip of water from a rusted tap felt like a countdown to a revelation too heavy for daylight. And outside the moon hung low and pale, casting a ghostly glow through the cracked window, illuminating her silhouette as if the night itself had crowned her its guardian and the disguised chef. Driven by curiosity and a mission to uncover the stories the world preferred to bury, felt the weight of a truth pressing against his chest, a truth that pulsed with urgency, danger, and sorrow. And as he lingered in the shadows, he noticed the way she paused, the knife hovering midair, as though she sensed his presence or perhaps sensed the memories clawing their way back to the surface. And with a slow inhale that trembled like a confession, she resumed cutting, faster now, sharper, each slice echoing with the silent scream of a past she refused to voice. And yet her face remained calm, almost serene, a mask sculpted by hardship and resolve, and the disguised chef wondered what force could bend a promising future away. From college halls and into the cold grasp of midnight labor, what unseen chain had pulled her from classrooms to cutting boards? What secret demanded such devotion that sleep itself had become a stranger? And while the knife danced in her grip with unsettling grace, the air grew heavier, thick with anticipation and dread, and the shadows around them seemed to lean closer, eager to witness what lay behind her silence. And somewhere in that moment, between the rhythm of steel and the breath of the night, a distant memory surfaced in the chef's mind, a rumor he had once dismissed, a story of a prodigy who vanished before graduation, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. A girl whose intellect had outshone her peers, yet whose name had quietly dissolved from records. And as he studied her profile, the curve of her jaw, the tired determination etched into her expression, the pieces began to align with a precision as sharp as the blade she wielded, and a realization crept in, slow and relentless, that this solitary black-uniformed cook was not merely preparing meat, but carving out a narrative forged in sacrifice and shadows. And the suspense tightened its grip, every second coiling with the promise of a secret too dark for morning. And in the midst of this haunting stillness, this suffocating mystery, a voice cut through the tension, not from within the kitchen, but from beyond the screen, calling out to every viewer drawn into this chilling tale, reminding them with urgency and warmth to share their location in the comments where they are watching this story unfold, to show their support by subscribing, liking, and sharing, becoming part of this shadowed journey and helping the truth reach beyond the quiet corners of the night. And as the call faded, the kitchen reclaimed its eerie dominance, the cook's knife glinting under the dying light like a silent oath. And the disguised chef took another cautious step forward, his heart pounding like a drum in a funeral march, knowing that whatever he was about to uncover would change not only her story, but his own. And still the night watched, patient and merciless, as the blade continued its solemn dance, promising that this was only the beginning, that the reason she skipped college was buried deep within layers of pain, betrayal, and a decision that had cost her everything. And as the clock ticked closer to dawn, the suspense wrapped tighter around the scene, sealing this first part of the story in a cloak of uncertainty, fear, and irresistible intrigue, leaving the air trembling with the certainty that the darkest secrets were yet to surface, and that when they did, no one would walk away unchanged. The moment stretched like a fragile thread on the edge of snapping as the disguised chef remained hidden behind the cold steel shelf, watching the black-clad cook move with an intensity that turned the ordinary into something eerily sacred. And the longer he observed her, the more the air seemed to thicken with unseen weight, as though every slice she made peeled back layers of a history the world had tried to forget. And within that dim kitchen, her silence spoke louder than words, a silence born not of peace, but of a storm that had raged for years beneath her composed exterior. And as the clock above the doorway crept forward, its faint ticking echoing like an anxious heartbeat, a sudden shift came over her, a pause not just of motion but of spirit. And in that tiny fracture of time, she lowered the knife, her gaze drifting to the faded photograph once more. And the disguised chef felt an indescribable pull, a sense that this was the moment when shadows would begin to confess. And as her fingers brushed the worn edges of the picture, a low breath escaped her lips, heavy with something that felt like grief, but sharper, edged with regret and quiet fury. And though no words were spoken aloud, the atmosphere vibrated with the memory of a young girl sitting in a classroom filled with sunlight and praise, a girl whose brilliance had once painted her future in vibrant colors of promise, a girl who had been offered scholarships, honors, and a path so clear that teachers spoke her name with admiration. And yet that same girl now stood in a lifeless kitchen at an hour meant for rest, surrendering her youth to loneliness and labor. And the disguised chef, sensing the gravity of her unspoken story, leaned slightly forward, his presence brushing against the fragile current of the night. And suddenly she turned, her eyes locking onto his reflection in the stainless steel surface, not startled, but sharp, calculating, as though she had always known he was there, waiting for someone brave enough or foolish enough to witness the truth she carried. And in that silent exchange, a surge of tension rippled through the room, the kind that breathes between danger and revelation. And slowly she turned back to her task. But her movements changed, slower now, more deliberate, as if each slice was a memory resurfacing, each measured motion a step into her past. And the disguised chef realized he was standing before someone who had not simply skipped college, but had been dragged away by circumstances crueler than failure, circumstances that had rewritten her destiny with ruthless precision. And the faint sound of the knife tapping the board became a rhythm that mirrored the story coiling within her, the story of a home once warm but shattered by betrayal, of nights filled with arguments and sudden silences, of promises broken and responsibilities misplaced upon shoulders too young to carry them. And in the glow of that lone bulb, her face seemed carved by sorrow, yet fortified by an unyielding resolve. A resolve that spoke of sacrifice, of choosing survival over ambition, of trading her dreams for the safety of someone she loved too deeply to abandon. And as the disguised chef's thoughts raced, he began to see visions in the dim air, fragmented reflections of her life, a hospital corridor lined with cold tiles, hands gripping a trembling form, a desperate rush through rain-soaked streets, in a final moment where she stood at a crossroads while the echo of opportunity faded behind her, leaving only duty and desperation in its place. And the suspense clawed tighter, breathing life into the unknown. And every corner of the kitchen seemed to pulse with the urgency of a story that demanded to be known yet feared exposure. And through it all, the voice of the unseen narrator returned, weaving between the silence and the shadows, urging everyone absorbed in this dark unfolding tale to comment their location below where they were watching from, to stand as silent witnesses of this midnight revelation, and to strengthen the journey by subscribing, liking, and sharing, becoming part of the narrative that bled emotion and suspense. And when the voice dissolved once more into the depths of the scene, the cook's expression hardened, her jaw setting with a quiet defiance. And without shifting her stance, she spoke softly into the stillness, her voice low and steady, not asking but declaring, a tone shaped by experience and guarded resilience. And though her words were few, they carried a weight that spoke of a decision sealed long ago, of a chapter ended before it could bloom, and the disguised chef felt the gravity of her presence, realizing that beyond the blade and the silence stood a human story rooted in heartbreak, loyalty, and a sacrifice so profound it had reshaped the very core of who she was. And the night deepened around them, wrapping every movement in thick anticipation as he stepped closer, closer still, until the boundary between observer and participant thinned, like glass stretched under heat. And in that charged moment, he understood that her reason for turning away from college was not weakness, but courage steeped in tragedy. A choice built upon a foundation of love and loss, intertwined so tightly that one could not exist without the other. And as the meat lay neatly arranged, as the knife rested for a fleeting second, the kitchen seemed to hold its breath, the suspense coiling tighter, winding toward an edge that promised to unravel everything, yet reveal nothing all at once. And outside the world slept unaware, while inside this narrow space, the weight of years resumed its silent march. The cook lifting her blade once again with renewed firmness, her eyes blazing with an intensity that hinted at a truth yet to be exposed, a truth that would haunt the disguised chef long after the night surrendered to dawn. And as the second part of this gripping tale drew to its end, the air vibrated with unresolved tension, leaving the story suspended between revelation and secrecy, its shadows alive with whispers of a sacrifice that had not yet revealed its darkest consequence. The kitchen felt smaller now, as if the walls had drawn closer to witness the moment that had been waiting since the first slice of the blade. And the disguised chef stood at the edge of a truth too sharp to touch, yet impossible to ignore, while the cook in black resumed her work with a quiet ferocity that rose not from anger, but from a history finally ready to surface. And as the night deepened into its final hour, before surrendering to dawn, her footsteps echoed softly across the tiled floor, a slow, deliberate pacing that mirrored the storm building in her chest. And the silence between them cracked not with words but with memory. Memory that flooded the air like cold water over fire, revealing the story that had carved her into the woman she had become. A story of a younger self with eyes still bright and hopeful, a future mapped with academic brilliance, acceptance letters stacked like victory trophies, and a family that once applauded her brilliance until applause turned to whispers and whispers turned to betrayal, till the night her world shattered beneath the weight of unforeseen tragedy. A night when sirens screamed through rain-soaked streets and hospital lights burned too white and too cruel. A night when she was forced into a choice that would rewrite her destiny forever, the choice between chasing dreams and holding together what little remained of home. And it was in that unbearable moment she turned away from college, not because she lacked courage, but because she possessed too much, because she loved someone too deeply to leave them alone in their darkest hour. And the disguised chef finally understood that every slice of meat, every sleepless night, every scar upon her hands was a silent tribute to the sacrifice she never demanded recognition for. And as her fingers tightened around the handle of the knife, her voice cut through the quiet with a low, steady resolve, speaking not of regret but of unwavering strength, declaring that some paths are not abandoned but exchanged for higher cost. And the weight of her revelation settled into the room like heavy mist, filling every inch with the reality of her pain and the dignity of her choice. And the suspense shifted from fear to awe, from uncertainty to a heavy understanding that this was not a story of loss but of endurance forged in fire and sharpened by necessity. And the disguised chef stepped forward fully into the light, no longer hiding behind shadows or pretense, his eyes no longer curious but humbled. And within that charged moment, an unseen bond formed between two strangers, linked by a truth. Too raw for daylight, yet too powerful to remain buried. And the echo of the narrator's voice once again flowed through the atmosphere, reminding every viewer watching this gripping tale from around the world to comment their location, where they were witnessing this emotional journey, and to support this story by subscribing, liking and sharing, strengthening the voice of resilience and sacrifice that beat at its core. And when the voice faded, the cook's expression softened just enough to reveal the human beneath the hardened exterior, the dreamer who had once stood at the edge of brilliance and chose instead to stand as a protector in the storm. And as the first faint glow of morning crept through the broken window, casting warm light across the stained tiles, the tension that had suffocated the room slowly transformed into a quiet clarity, a realization that some heroes do not wear capes or stand on grand stages, but stand alone at 3 a.m. in silent kitchens, holding the weight of the world in their palms. And the disguised chef knew that exposing her story was no longer about unveiling scandal or stirring shock, but about honoring a truth soaked in courage. And as he turned toward the exit, the cook continued her work not as a prisoner of fate, but as a guardian of her own narrative. Her blade no longer a symbol of dread, but of survival. And with every step he took away from the kitchen, the suspense that had haunted the night dissolved into a bittersweet reverence, leaving behind an imprint of a story that would linger long after the last echo of steel faded. And as the sun finally broke through the horizon, washing the world with fragile gold, the mystery found its resolution in the quiet strength of her unwavering spirit. And the legend of the black-clad cook, who skipped college for a reason deeper than ambition, lived on. Not as a whisper of darkness, but as a testament to the silent warriors who trade their dreams for the ones they love, sealing this haunting tale with a powerful truth that courage often hides in shadows and the deepest sacrifices are made in silence.